There are moments in life when the people you trust most reveal their true nature in the cruelest possible way. For me, that moment came on a sunny Tuesday morning in March, when I held the deed to my fully paid-off condo in my trembling hands, only to hear my sister-in-law Linda announce with shocking casualness, "Well, now that it's paid off, it's really a family asset, isn't it? We'll be moving in next month." Those words didn't just shatter my morning coffee routine, they shattered my entire understanding of family, loyalty, and the lengths some people will go to steal what isn't theirs. My name carries the weight of 3 generations of hard work in this country. My grandfather came here with nothing but calloused hands and an unbreakable spirit, working construction jobs that built the very skyline of our city. My father continued that legacy, teaching me that everything worth having must be earned through sweat, sacrifice, and unwavering determination. Growing up in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, I learned early that money doesn't grow on trees, and that financial security comes only to those willing to fight for it. Every dollar I earned as a teenager mowing lawns and delivering newspapers went into a coffee can labeled Future Dreams that sat on my bedroom windowsill, collecting not just coins but hope itself. When I met Sarah in college, she seemed to share those same values of hard work and financial responsibility. She came from a middle-class family in Connecticut. Her father worked as a bank manager, her mother as a school administrator. They lived in a neat colonial house with a white picket fence, the very picture of American suburban success. Sarah was studying accounting, dreaming of starting her own practice someday, and I was pursuing engineering, hoping to design the bridges and buildings that would connect communities. We spent countless evenings in the library together, not just studying our textbooks, but planning our future, a future built on mutual respect, shared goals, and the promise that we'd always be honest with each other about money and family. But even during those early dating years, I noticed something unsettling about Sarah's sister Linda, 5 years older than Sarah. Linda had a way of inserting herself into every conversation, every plan, every milestone. When Sarah and I announced our engagement, Linda immediately began suggesting venues, criticizing our budget choices, and making comments about how family money should be managed. She had been married to Robert for 8 years by then, but they lived in a perpetual state of financial chaos, bouncing between rental properties, maxing out credit cards, and always having some excuse for why they couldn't quite get ahead. Robert worked sporadically in sales, always chasing the next big opportunity that never materialized, while Linda worked part-time at a boutique but spent more on clothes than she earned. The red flags were there from the beginning, but love has a way of making you overlook the warning signs that seem so obvious in hindsight. During our wedding planning, Linda constantly made comments about how Sarah and I should think bigger and how family investments were the key to building wealth. She suggested we skip the honeymoon and put that money toward a family property instead. When we politely declined, she spent weeks calling Sarah, filling her head with ideas about how married couples needed to think beyond just themselves and consider the broader family financial picture. Sarah would come home from these conversations, looking confused and stressed, torn between her loyalty to me and the pressure from her sister. After our wedding in 2018, Sarah and I moved into a small 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. It wasn't glamorous. The kitchen was barely big enough for one person. The bathroom had a window that wouldn't close properly, and the neighbors upstairs seemed to practice tap dancing at 3 in the morning. But it was ours. We painted the walls ourselves, furnished it with second-hand finds and wedding gifts, and created a cozy home that reflected our shared dreams. I was working as a junior engineer at a construction firm, earning a modest but steady salary, while Sarah had landed a position at a small accounting firm in Manhattan. We lived frugally, cooking dinner at home most nights, finding free entertainment in the city's parks and museums, and carefully tracking every expense in a shared spreadsheet. Our goal was clear and ambitious: save enough for a down payment on our own place within 3 years. We calculated that we needed at least $60,000 to secure a decent condo in a safe neighborhood with good transportation links. Every month, we transferred exactly $1,500 into our savings account, treating it like a non-negotiable bill. We canceled streaming services we didn't absolutely need, packed lunches instead of buying them, and turned down expensive social invitations that didn't fit our budget. Our friends sometimes teased us about being cheap, but we knew we were being smart. Every sacrifice brought us closer to our dream of home ownership. Linda, however, seemed to view our disciplined saving as some kind of personal challenge to her lifestyle. During family dinners, she would make pointed comments about how young couples today are so focused on material things, while simultaneously bragging about her latest designer handbag or expensive restaurant experience. She had a talent for making our responsible financial choices sound selfish and our modest apartments seem inadequate. "Don't you want to live a little?" she would ask Sarah, gesturing around their latest rental property, always nicer than what they could actually afford, always temporary, because they couldn't keep up with the rent. The breaking point in Linda's marriage to Robert came in late 2019. During the holiday season that should have been filled with joy but instead became a financial and emotional disaster. Robert had convinced Linda to invest their entire savings, what little they had, into a multi-level marketing scheme selling luxury skincare products. He attended seminars, bought inventory, and spent weeks trying to recruit friends and family members into his business opportunity. Linda quit her part-time job to focus on selling products, confident that they were on the verge of financial breakthrough. Instead, they found themselves drowning in debt, with boxes of unsold face cream cluttering their apartment and creditors calling daily. When the eviction notice arrived in January 2020, Linda's first call wasn't to a financial counselor or job placement agency, it was to Sarah. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard Sarah's side of the conversation, her voice growing increasingly stressed as Linda explained their temporary situation. They needed a place to stay just for a few weeks while they got back on their feet. Robert had a job interview lined up. Linda was applying for positions, and they just needed family support to get through this rough patch. Sarah looked at me with pleading eyes, and despite every instinct screaming warnings in my brain, I nodded. Family helps family, right? Those few weeks stretched into 6 months of hell. Linda and Robert moved into our tiny one-bedroom apartment, transforming our peaceful sanctuary into a chaotic nightmare. They took over the living room, their belongings spreading into every corner of our space. Linda criticized everything, our grocery choices, our cleaning habits, our evening routines. She complained that our apartment was too small, too noisy, too far from where she wanted to work. Robert spent his days playing video games and browsing social media instead of job hunting, leaving a trail of dirty dishes and empty food containers in his wake. Our carefully maintained budget exploded as our grocery bills doubled and our utility costs skyrocketed, but the worst part wasn't the financial strain or the loss of privacy, it was watching Linda systematically manipulate Sarah. Every conversation became an opportunity for Linda to plant seeds of doubt about our relationship, our financial goals, and our future plans. She would pull Sarah aside for sister talks that always ended with Sarah questioning whether we were being too aggressive with our savings, too focused on our own goals, too selfish in our life choices. Linda had a genius for making her own poor decisions sound like bad luck while making our responsible choices sound like moral failures. When we finally gave them an ultimatum in July 2020, find your own place by the end of the month, or we'll start charging rent, Linda's reaction was explosive. She accused us of being heartless, of abandoning family, of caring more about money than people. She sobbed to Sarah about how cruel and materialistic I was becoming, how marriage had changed me for the worse. The guilt trip worked partially. Sarah agreed that they needed to leave, but insisted we give them more time and help them find an affordable place. I agreed, but only because I could see the emotional toll this conflict was taking on my wife. Finding them an apartment became my full-time obsession for 3 weeks. I scoured rental listings, made phone calls, even offered to co-sign a lease, despite the financial risk. Finally, we found them a 2-bedroom place in a decent neighborhood, more expensive than they could afford, but acceptable to Linda's standards. I paid their security deposit and first month's rent, telling myself it was an investment in our marriage's future peace. As they moved out in August 2020, Linda hugged Sarah tearfully and thanked us profusely, promising this was just a temporary loan and they'd pay us back as soon as Robert's new job became permanent. Of course, we never saw that money again, but at the time, getting our space back felt worth any price. Sarah and I spent a week deep cleaning our apartment, replacing everything that had been damaged or used up, and slowly rebuilding the peaceful home environment we had lost. Our savings had taken a significant hit, nearly $8,000 between helping with their rent, increased living costs, and the security deposit loan. But we were young, determined, and relieved to be alone again. We recalculated our timeline, tightened our budget even further, and recommitted to our homeownership goal. The pandemic year of 2020 brought unexpected opportunities alongside its challenges. With everyone working from home, Sarah and I saved money on commuting, work clothes, and eating out. We took advantage of low interest rates and started seriously house hunting in late 2020. The market was competitive, but we had excellent credit scores, stable employment, and a solid down payment saved. After months of searching, we found it. A beautiful 2-bedroom condo in a converted warehouse building in an up-and-coming neighborhood of Brooklyn. The unit had exposed brick walls, huge windows, and a modern kitchen that made our hearts sing. The monthly mortgage payment would be less than what comparable rentals were going for, and the building had great amenities including a fitness center and rooftop garden. The closing process in March 2021 was one of the most stressful and exciting experiences of our lives. Signing document after document, transferring funds, receiving those magical keys that represented years of sacrifice and dreams realized. Our first night in our own place, Sarah and I sat on the floor of our empty living room, eating takeout Chinese food and marveling at the fact that we were actual homeowners. The mortgage was substantial, $3,200 per month, but manageable with both our incomes. We had purchased the condo for $485,000, putting down 20% to avoid private mortgage insurance. Linda's reaction to our home purchase was complicated from the start. Publicly, she congratulated us and gushed about how proud she was of Sarah's success. Privately, her comments carried undertones of resentment and entitlement that made me increasingly uncomfortable. During her first visit to our new place, she walked through every room making notes about the potential of the space, suggesting improvements and changes as if she were planning to redecorate. She commented on how much space we had just for 2 people, and how the second bedroom would be perfect for guests, meaning her and Robert, when they inevitably needed a place to stay again. Her marriage to Robert continued its downward spiral. Throughout 2021, he cycled through 3 different jobs, each one ending in drama and conflict. Linda went back to work but constantly complained about her retail management position, the difficult customers, the unfair schedule, the inadequate pay. Their rental situation remained unstable. They moved twice that year, each time because of late rent payments or disputes with landlords. Each crisis brought phone calls to Sarah, emotional manipulation disguised as family bonding, and increasingly obvious hints that they needed our help again. The first time Linda suggested she and Robert move in with us was during Thanksgiving dinner 2021. She framed it as a temporary solution that would benefit everyone. They could help with the mortgage payments, assist with household maintenance, and provide family company for Sarah while I worked long hours. The suggestion was presented so casually, buried in conversation about holiday plans and New Year resolutions, that Sarah didn't immediately recognize it for the calculated manipulation it was. I shut it down firmly but politely, explaining that we valued our privacy and weren't ready for roommates. Linda's response was to launch a months-long campaign to change our minds. She enlisted their mother in the effort, painting their housing instability as a temporary crisis that families should solve together. She reminded Sarah constantly of how they had helped during Sarah's college years, paying for textbooks, providing emotional support during difficult times, treating her to dinners and shopping trips when money was tight. The guilt campaign was sophisticated and relentless, designed to make Sarah feel obligated to return favors that had been given freely years earlier. Meanwhile, I threw myself into career advancement and mortgage paydown with the intensity of a man possessed. I took on overtime projects, freelance consulting work, and side gigs that utilized my engineering skills. Every extra dollar went toward our mortgage principal, accelerating our payoff timeline from 30 years to hopefully 15. Sarah supported this aggressive approach initially, understanding that early mortgage payoff would give us financial freedom and security that most couples our age could only dream of. We lived well below our means, celebrated small victories, and watched our mortgage balance decrease month by month. But Linda's influence on Sarah was persistent and toxic. During their regular phone calls and sister outings, Linda would plant doubts about my financial priorities, suggesting that I was becoming obsessed with money at the expense of family relationships. She portrayed our mortgage acceleration strategy as selfish hoarding, our reluctance to help family as cold-hearted kaput. Sarah began questioning whether we were being too aggressive with our savings, whether we should enjoy life more, whether family obligations should take priority over financial goals. The tension in our marriage reached a crescendo in the summer of 2022 when Linda and Robert faced their most serious financial crisis yet. Robert had been fired from his sales position for falsifying client reports, making him essentially unemployable in his field. Linda's retail job barely covered their basic expenses, and they were facing eviction again. This time, the emotional manipulation reached new levels. Linda called Sarah crying every day, describing their desperate situation in heartbreaking detail, begging for help, not just with money, but with housing. The fights Sarah and I had about this situation was the worst conflict of our marriage. She felt torn between her loyalty to me and her love for her sister. I felt manipulated and resentful, watching our financial progress threatened by Linda's poor choices and sense of entitlement. We attended couples counseling for 3 months, working through issues of boundaries, family loyalty, and financial priorities. The counselor helped us establish clear guidelines for family assistance. We would provide emotional support and limited financial help, but we would not risk our own financial security or housing stability for anyone else's problems. Armed with these new boundaries, we offered Linda and Robert a one-time gift of $2,000 to help with their housing crisis. But we made it clear this was not a loan to be repaid and would not be repeated. We also offered to help them find resources for financial counseling and job placement assistance. Linda accepted the money, but rejected our other suggestions, continuing to call Sarah multiple times per week, seeking additional help and sympathy. The emotional manipulation continued, but at least our physical space and financial plan remained protected. Throughout 2023, I continued my obsessive focus on mortgage payoff with even greater intensity. I picked up weekend construction work, leveraged my engineering skills for consulting projects, and even started a small side business helping neighbors with home improvement projects. Sarah initially supported these efforts, proud of our progress and excited about the prospect of mortgage freedom. We celebrated each milestone, paying off $10,000 of principal, then $25,000, then $50,000. Our mortgage balance dropped from over $400,000 to less than $300,000 in just 2 years, but success brought unexpected challenges. As our equity grew and our financial situation improved, Linda's resentment and entitlement intensified. Her comments during family gatherings became increasingly pointed, criticizing our lifestyle choices and questioning our priorities. She would make remarks about how some people care more about property values than family values, how money changes people for the worse, how success can make couples selfish and isolated. These comments were designed to make Sarah feel guilty about our achievements and question whether we were becoming the kind of people she wanted to be. The breaking point came during Christmas 2023, when Linda made her most audacious suggestion yet. During gift exchange at Sarah's parents' house, Linda announced that she and Robert had been thinking about family investment strategies and believed we should all pool our resources for everyone's benefit. She suggested that since our condo was gaining value, we should consider refinancing and using the equity to purchase a larger property that both couples could share. She presented this idea as if it were brilliant financial planning rather than a transparent attempt to access our equity for her benefit. I politely but firmly rejected this suggestion, explaining that we were focused on paying off our current mortgage rather than taking on additional debt. Linda's response was swift and vicious. She accused me of being selfish, controlling, and destructive to family relationships. She told Sarah that marriage had changed me, that I was no longer the generous person she had fallen in love with, that I was prioritizing money over family in ways that would ultimately destroy our relationship. The Christmas celebration ended in tears and angry words, with Linda storming out and declaring that she was done trying to help people who don't appreciate family. The aftermath of that Christmas confrontation marked a turning point in Linda's approach. Instead of the direct manipulation tactics she had used before, she began a more subtle campaign of undermining and boundary testing. She would show up at our condo unannounced, claiming to be in the neighborhood and hoping to visit. She would ask to borrow small household items that she would never return, She began treating our home as if it were partially hers, rearranging furniture during visits, commenting on our decorating choices, and making suggestions for improvements. As if she had a stake in the property, Sarah seemed oblivious to these escalating boundary violations, treating Linda's behavior as annoying but harmless sister dynamics. I found myself becoming increasingly protective of our space and possessions, which Linda interpreted as evidence of my growing selfishness and materialism. She would comment to Sarah about how territorial I had become, how I seemed to value objects more than relationships, how success was changing my personality in concerning ways. Meanwhile, my mortgage payoff project was entering its final phase. By December 2023, our balance had dropped below $50,000, an amount that felt achievable within months rather than years. I increased my work efforts even more, taking on every overtime hour available, accepting consulting projects that required weekend and evening work, and pushing myself to physical and emotional exhaustion in pursuit of this goal. Sarah supported the final push, understanding that mortgage freedom would transform our financial future and provide security that would benefit us for decades. The last payment was scheduled for March 15, 2024, a date I had circled on our calendar with red marker and treated like a countdown to financial liberation. The final months required extreme sacrifice. We lived on rice and beans, cancelled all entertainment expenses, and poured every available dollar toward the mortgage balance. But as that number dropped below $10,000, then $5,000, then $1,000, the excitement was overwhelming. We were actually going to own our home outright at ages 31 and 29, respectively, an achievement that would give us financial flexibility that most Americans never experience. On March 14, 2024, I made the final electronic transfer. That brought our mortgage balance to zero. The next morning I called the bank to confirm the payoff and request expedited delivery of our deed. The customer service representative congratulated me warmly, explaining that mortgage payoff at our age was extremely rare and commendable. The deed would arrive within 5 business days, officially documenting our complete ownership of the property. That evening, Sarah and I celebrated with champagne and takeout from our favorite restaurant, toasting not just the financial achievement, but the years of sacrifice and teamwork that had made it possible. The deed arrived on Tuesday, March 19, 2024, a thick envelope containing official documents that represented the culmination of years of dreams and hard work. I held that deed in my hands like it was made of gold, reading every word of legal language that confirmed our complete and unencumbered ownership of our home. Sarah and I planned to frame it, display it prominently, and use it as motivation for our next financial goals, building an emergency fund, maximizing retirement contributions, and eventually saving for a larger home when we were ready to start. A family. Linda called Sarah that morning, claiming she needed to discuss something important and asking if she could come over immediately. This wasn't unusual. Linda often used vague urgency to create opportunities for impromptu visits and emotional manipulation. Sarah agreed without consulting me, assuming this was another routine sister crisis that would require emotional support and possibly small financial assistance. When Linda arrived with Robert in tow, both carrying overnight bags and several boxes, my internal alarm system started screaming warnings, but nothing could have prepared me for Linda's opening statement as she surveyed our living room with proprietary satisfaction. "Well, now that it's paid off, it's really a family asset, isn't it? We'll be moving in next month." The words hit me like a physical blow, so outrageous and presumptuous that I initially thought she was making some kind of twisted joke, but her expression was completely serious, and Robert was already exploring our second bedroom, as if evaluating his future living space. If you've ever experienced a moment when reality shifts so dramatically that you question your own understanding of the world, then you know how I felt standing in my own living room, deed to my property in my hands, listening to my sister-in-law announce her intention to move into my home because she considered it a family asset. Please leave a comment with the word "unbelievable" if you can imagine how shocking this moment was. And make sure to subscribe for more incredible true stories like this one. The silence that followed Linda's announcement stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Sarah stood frozen between us, her face cycling through confusion, shock, and dawning horror as she began to understand what her sister was actually suggesting. Robert continued his casual inspection of our second bedroom, running his hands along the walls and commenting approvingly on the natural light and storage space. Linda watched my reaction with the satisfaction of someone who believed she had played a winning hand in a game I didn't even know we were playing. "Excuse me," I finally managed to say, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. The deed crumpled slightly in my grip as my hands unconsciously tightened around the document that proved my ownership of this property. "What exactly do you mean by family asset?" Linda's smile widened as if she were explaining something obvious to a slow child. "Well, now that there's no mortgage payment, the property is generating value for the family instead of the bank. It makes perfect sense for family members to live here and contribute to the household instead of throwing money away on rent somewhere else. We can all pool our resources, share expenses, and build wealth together instead of separately." The logic was so twisted, so fundamentally wrong, that I struggled to form a coherent response. "Linda, this is our home. We bought it, we've been paying for it, and we just finished paying off the mortgage. It's not a family asset. It's Sarah and my private property." "But that's such a selfish way to look at it," Linda replied, settling onto our couch as if she already lived there. "Family should help family. You two have been so blessed with good jobs and financial success. Shouldn't you want to share those blessings with people you love, especially when we're going through such a difficult time financially?" I looked at Sarah, desperate for her to speak up, to clarify that her sister had fundamentally misunderstood something, to shut down this insane conversation before it went any further. But Sarah remained silent, staring at the floor, clearly struggling with conflicting loyalties and emotions. Her silence felt like a betrayal that cut deeper than Linda's outrageous demands. Robert returned from his bedroom inspection with enthusiastic approval. "This will work perfectly," he announced. "We can set up our home office in there, and the second bathroom will give us the privacy we need. The kitchen's big enough for all of us, and the living room has great space for entertaining. We really appreciate you guys letting us stay here while we get back on our feet." "Nobody said anything about letting you stay here," I said firmly, finding my voice and my backbone simultaneously. "This is not happening. You cannot move into our home just because we paid off our mortgage. That makes no sense legally, financially, or morally." Linda's expression shifted from satisfied confidence to wounded indignation. "I can't believe how selfish you've become. Sarah, is this really the man you married? Someone who would turn away family members in their time of need? Someone who cares more about property ownership than helping people he's supposed to love?" This was the moment when I realized that Linda's manipulation had reached its final, desperate phase. Unable to guilt us into voluntarily sharing our home and resources, she was now attempting to simply declare herself entitled to what we had earned. The audacity was breathtaking, but it was also clarifying this wasn't a misunderstanding or a temporary crisis request. This was attempted theft disguised as family values. "Sarah," I said, turning to my wife with as much calm as I could manage, "please tell your sister that she and Robert cannot move into our home. Please tell her that our mortgage payoff doesn't change anything about property ownership or family obligations. Please tell her that this conversation is over." But Sarah's response shattered my heart and changed everything I thought I knew about our marriage. "Maybe," she said quietly, not meeting my eyes, "maybe we should think about it. They are family, and we do have the extra space now that we're not worried about mortgage payments. Maybe it would be good for everyone if we found a way to help." The betrayal was so complete and unexpected that I felt physically dizzy. My own wife, the woman who had stood beside me through years of sacrifice and hard work to achieve this moment, was actually considering giving it away to her manipulative sister and deadbeat brother-in-law. The deed in my hands felt like the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly become unrecognizable. "Sarah, we need to talk privately," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "Linda, Robert, you need to leave now. This conversation is not continuing." "We're not going anywhere," Linda declared, crossing her arms defiantly. "This affects all of us, and we have a right to be part of the discussion. Sarah is my sister, and I'm not going to let you bully her into making decisions that go against her family values." The situation was escalating beyond anything I had imagined possible. In my own living room, holding the deed to my own property, I was being treated like an unwelcome guest by people who had no legal or moral claim to anything I owned. The psychological warfare was sophisticated and brutal. Linda had positioned herself as the defender of family values, while casting me as the selfish villain who valued money over relationships. "Get out," I said, my voice finally reflecting the anger and disbelief that was consuming me. "Get out of my house right now, and don't come back unless you're invited. This is my property, legally and completely, and you have no right to be here making demands about how I use it." Linda gasped dramatically, turning to Sarah with tears in her eyes. "Do you hear how he's talking to me? This is your sister, Sarah, the person who helped raise you, who supported you through college, who has always been there for you, and he's throwing me out like I'm some kind of stranger. Is this really who you want to be married to?" The manipulation was masterful. Linda had transformed herself from aggressor to victim in a single sentence, making my reasonable boundary setting sound like cruel abuse. She was banking on Sarah's guilt, love, and family loyalty to override logic, law, and fairness. And for a terrifying moment, it seemed like the strategy might work. Sarah looked back and forth between us, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Everyone, please just calm down. We don't have to decide anything right now. Maybe we can find a compromise that works for everyone." "There is no compromise," I said firmly. "This is not a negotiation. They cannot move into our home, period. They have no legal right to be here, no moral claim to our property, and no authority to make decisions about how we use our own home." "But their family," Sarah pleaded. "Linda helped me so much when I was younger. Don't you think we owe it to family to help when we can?" This was the moment when I understood that Linda's years of manipulation had been more successful than I had realized. Sarah genuinely believed that paying off our mortgage somehow changed our obligations to her sister, that financial success created moral duties to share our achievements with family members who hadn't contributed to earning them. The psychological conditioning had been thorough and effective. "We don't owe anyone our home," I said, trying to reach whatever part of Sarah still understood property rights and personal boundaries. "We earned this through our work, our sacrifice, our planning. Linda and Robert made their own choices that led to their financial problems. Those problems don't become our responsibility just because we solved our own." Linda's tears were flowing freely now, a display of emotional manipulation that would have impressed professional actresses. "I never thought my own sister would abandon me when I needed help the most. After everything our family has been through, after all the support I gave you over the years, this is how you repay me, by letting your husband throw me out on the streets." The gaslighting was so intense that I could see Sarah beginning to doubt herself, to question whether I was being unreasonable, to wonder if saying no to Linda's demands really did make us bad people. Years of conditioning were overriding months of couples counseling and boundary-setting work. The psychological manipulation was winning. "Nobody is throwing you out on the streets," I said, trying to inject reason into an increasingly irrational situation. "You have your own apartment, your own lives, your own responsibilities. We are not your backup plan, your safety net, or your retirement fund. We are a married couple who just achieved a major financial goal, and we have the right to enjoy that achievement without having it stolen from us." "Stolen?" Linda shrieked. "How dare you accuse me of stealing when all I want is for our family to help each other and stick together? You've poisoned Sarah's mind against her own family, turned her into someone who cares more about money than love. And now you're trying to make me sound like a criminal for wanting family unity." The projection was stunning. Linda was accusing me of exactly what she had been doing to Sarah for years. She had indeed poisoned Sarah's mind, but against me rather than against her own family. She had indeed made someone care more about money than love, but it was herself rather than us. She was indeed acting like a criminal, but she was casting herself as the victim of her own crimes. Robert, who had been silent during most of this confrontation, finally spoke up with what he probably thought was helpful mediation. "Look, nobody has to get upset here. We're all family, and family can work things out. Maybe we can start with a short-term arrangement, just a month or two while we look for a new place and see how it goes. If it works out well for everyone, maybe we can make it more permanent." The casual assumption that this was still a possibility, that my clear refusal was just an opening negotiating position, revealed how completely Linda and Robert had divorced themselves from reality. They genuinely believed that Sarah's family connection gave them rights to our property that superseded my legal ownership and personal boundaries. The entitlement was so absolute that they couldn't even process the word no as a final answer. "This is not a negotiation," I repeated, my patience finally exhausted. The answer is no. No to short-term stays. No to permanent arrangements. No to family investment strategies. No to sharing our home with anyone. The answer is no, and it will remain no, regardless of how much crying, guilt-tripping, or emotional manipulation you use. Linda turned to Sarah with desperate pleading. Sarah, please, you can't let him do this to your own family. You can't choose his selfishness over your sister's welfare. Think about everything we've meant to each other over the years. Think about what Mom and Dad would say if they knew you were abandoning me when I needed help the most. This final appeal to parental authority and sibling guilt was Linda's nuclear option, the manipulation tactic designed to override all logic and reason. She was betting that Sarah's fear of disappointing her parents and betraying her sister would be stronger than her commitment to her marriage and her understanding of basic property rights. For several long moments, Sarah stood silent, the weight of impossible choices visible on her face. She was being forced to choose between her husband and her sister, between financial wisdom and family loyalty, between her future and her past. Linda had engineered this moment carefully, creating a crisis that would test every aspect of Sarah's identity and values. When Sarah finally spoke, her words changed everything. Linda, I love you, but you're wrong. This is our home, not a family asset. We earned it together, and we have the right to decide how it's used. He can't move in with us, and he can't keep asking us to solve your financial problems. The victory was sweet, but incomplete. Sarah had chosen correctly, but the damage to our marriage was severe. Linda's manipulation had revealed deep fault lines in our relationship, fundamental disagreements about family obligations and financial boundaries that would require serious work to repair, and Linda's reaction to Sarah's decision would prove that this battle was far from over. If you're enjoying this story and want to see how this family drama unfolds, please subscribe to the channel. The best part is coming up, and you won't want to miss how Linda responds to being told no, and the lengths she goes to get what she wants. Linda's reaction to Sarah's decision was immediate and volcanic. The tears stopped as if someone had turned off a faucet, replaced by a fury so intense that it seemed to fill our entire living room. Her face contorted with rage, and when she spoke, her voice carried a venom that revealed the true person behind years of manipulative sweetness. You ungrateful little bitch, she hissed at Sarah, the mask of sisterly love completely discarded. After everything I've done for you, after all the years I protected you and supported you, this is how you repay me, by choosing money over family, by letting this controlling asshole turn you against your own blood. The verbal assault was so vicious and sudden that Sarah stepped backward as if she'd been physically struck. In all the years I'd known Linda, through all her manipulation and emotional blackmail, I had never seen her drop her facade so completely. The real Linda was finally visible, not the devoted sister concerned about family unity, but a narcissistic predator who felt entitled to other people's success. Don't you dare speak to my wife that way, I said, moving protectively in front of Sarah. You've revealed exactly who you really are, and it's disgusting. Get out of our home now, before I call the police. Police? Linda laughed bitterly. You think the police care about family disputes? You think anyone is going to take your side when they hear how you're treating family members who need help? Everyone will see you for what you really are, a selfish, greedy man who values property more than people. Robert tried to calm his wife, clearly uncomfortable with the level of hostility erupting around him. Linda, maybe we should go home and think about this. Maybe there's another way to work things out. There's nothing to work out, Linda snapped at him. They've made their choice. They've chosen greed over family, selfishness over love. But this isn't over, not by a long shot. The threat in her voice was unmistakable, and I felt a chill of apprehension about what Linda might do when faced with absolute rejection of her demands. Her sense of entitlement was so complete, her need for control so desperate, that I doubted she would simply accept defeat and move on with her life. What exactly is that supposed to mean? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. Linda gathered her purse and coat with theatrical dignity, her movements sharp with barely contained rage. It means that family has obligations to each other, whether you acknowledge them or not. It means that there are consequences to abandoning people who love you. It means that this conversation is far from over. As they prepared to leave, Linda turned back to Sarah with one final manipulation attempt. When you realize what a mistake you've made, when you see how this man has changed you into someone cold and heartless, remember that I tried to help you. Remember that I offered you a chance to do the right thing before it was too late." The door slammed behind them with enough force to rattle our windows, leaving Sarah and me alone in a silence heavy with unresolved tension. Sarah collapsed onto our couch, her hands shaking as the full impact of the confrontation hit her. She had stood up to Linda, but the cost of that strength was visible in every line of her body. "I'm sorry," she whispered, not meeting my eyes. "I'm so sorry I even hesitated. I know she was wrong. I know this is our home, but she's been in my head for so long, making me feel guilty about everything we've achieved." I sat beside her, setting the deed carefully on our coffee table, where it caught the afternoon light streaming through our windows. "You did the right thing in the end. That's what matters. But Sarah, we need to talk about how deeply Linda has affected your thinking. This can't happen again." The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of our marriage. Sarah admitted that Linda's years of manipulation had left her constantly second-guessing our financial decisions, feeling guilty about our success, and wondering if we were becoming the selfish people Linda claimed we were. She had been carrying this psychological burden for months, undermining her confidence in our choices and our relationship. She made me feel like achieving our goals was somehow wrong, Sarah explained through tears. Like paying off our mortgage early was selfish instead of smart. Like wanting to enjoy our own home was greedy instead of normal. I started wondering if maybe she was right, if maybe we were becoming people who cared more about money than relationships. The depth of Linda's psychological manipulation was staggering. She had spent years systematically undermining Sarah's confidence, planting doubts about our marriage, and reframing our responsible financial choices as moral failures. The campaign had been so subtle and persistent that Sarah hadn't even realized it was happening. "We need to set clear boundaries," I said firmly. "No more unannounced visits, no more emergency financial requests, no more guilt trips about family obligations. Linda has proven that she can't respect our marriage or our property rights. We need to protect ourselves." Sarah nodded reluctantly, understanding the necessity, but still struggling with the guilt Linda had programmed into her. What if she really does need help? What if something terrible happens to them? How will I live with myself if I don't help my own sister? This was the core of Linda's manipulation, the implanted belief that Sarah was responsible for her sister's welfare, that refusing to sacrifice our financial security somehow made us bad people. Undoing years of this conditioning would take time, therapy, and constant vigilance. Over the following days, Linda launched what I can only describe as a psychological warfare campaign, designed to break down our defenses and force us to reconsider her demands. The attacks came from multiple angles, each one carefully calculated to exploit Sarah's remaining guilt and my growing isolation from her family. First came the phone calls. Linda called Sarah multiple times per day, sometimes crying about their desperate housing situation, sometimes angry about our betrayal of family values, sometimes calmly explaining why sharing our home was actually the logical and moral choice. Each call left Sarah emotionally drained and questioning our decisions. Then came the family pressure campaign. Linda contacted Sarah's parents, presenting a carefully edited version of events that painted us as heartless landlords who had kicked out desperate family members for no reason other than greed. She told them that we had plenty of space but were refusing to help because we cared more about privacy than family welfare. The results were predictable. Sarah's mother called in tears, begging us to reconsider helping Linda. Sarah's father called angry, demanding to know when his daughter had become so selfish and cruel. Neither parent understood the years of manipulation and entitlement that had led to this crisis, seeing only what appeared to be wealthy young people abandoning family in need. "Maybe we should explain everything to them," Sarah suggested after a particularly painful call from her mother. "Tell them about Linda's history of financial irresponsibility, about her sense of entitlement, about what she actually said when she came here." But I knew that Linda had already controlled the narrative, positioning herself as the victim and us as the villains. Any attempt to defend ourselves would sound like making excuses for abandoning family. Linda had played this game for years and knew exactly how to manipulate family dynamics to her advantage. The social media campaign began a week later. Linda posted carefully crafted messages about the importance of family support during difficult times, sharing inspirational quotes about helping those in need and standing by the people you love. She never mentioned us directly, but the implication was clear to everyone who knew our situation. Her Facebook posts generated sympathy and support from friends and extended family members who didn't understand the full context. Comments poured in praising Linda for her positive attitude during difficult times and criticizing unnamed family members who had apparently abandoned her in her hour of need. People are starting to ask me about Linda's posts, Sarah reported after running into a family friend at the grocery store. Everyone thinks we've done something terrible to her. They don't understand that she was trying to move into our home without permission. The court of public opinion was turning against us, exactly as Linda had planned. She understood that most people would see a desperate family being refused help by successful relatives and would naturally sympathize with what appeared to be the underdogs in the situation. But Linda's masterstroke came 2 weeks after our confrontation, in the form of a certified letter delivered to our home on a Saturday morning. I signed for the thick envelope with a sense of foreboding that proved entirely justified when I read the contents. The letter was from a law firm, informing us that Linda Hartwell was pursuing legal action to establish her rights as a beneficiary of what she termed family property acquired through joint family support. The legal language was confusing and seemingly nonsensical, but the threat was clear. Linda was attempting to sue us for a share of our home's equity. The lawsuit claimed that Linda had provided substantial financial and emotional support during our marriage that had contributed to our ability to purchase and pay off our home. She was seeking recognition as a minority stakeholder in our property, with rights to occupy the premises and receive compensation for her investment in our success. The legal claims were absurd, with no basis in law or fact, but the lawsuit itself was a devastating psychological weapon. Even frivolous lawsuits require expensive legal defense, create months or years of stress and uncertainty, and can damage reputations regardless of their eventual outcome. She's actually suing us, Sarah said in disbelief, reading the legal documents with shaking hands. She's claiming that she has ownership rights in her home because she helped us during college and supported our relationship. I felt a rage so pure and intense that it took all my self-control not to drive immediately to Linda's apartment and confront her about this latest escalation. She had moved beyond manipulation and emotional blackmail into outright legal warfare, using the court system as a weapon to force us to submit to her demands. The claims are completely without merit, I said, trying to remain calm despite the fury building inside me. No court is going to give her ownership rights in our home, based on sisterly advice and emotional support. But defending against this lawsuit is going to cost us thousands of dollars and months of stress. That was Linda's real strategy, not to win in court, but to make our lives so miserable and expensive that we would eventually surrender to her demands just to make the harassment stop. She was betting that the cost of fighting her would exceed the cost of giving her what she wanted. The next few weeks became a crash course in family law and property rights. We hired an attorney who specialized in real estate disputes, a sharp woman in her 50s who immediately understood the dynamics at play. This is what we call a vexatious lawsuit, our lawyer explained during our first consultation. It has no legal merit, but it's designed to harass and intimidate you into a settlement. The good news is that these cases rarely succeed. The bad news is that defending against them requires time, money, and emotional energy that you shouldn't have to spend. Legal discovery process began, requiring us to provide extensive documentation about our property purchase, our financial history, and our relationships with Linda and Robert. Every bank statement, every mortgage payment, every financial record had to be gathered, copied, and submitted to prove what should have been obvious, that we owned our home and Linda had no legal claim to it. Meanwhile, Linda escalated her public relations campaign. She began telling anyone who would listen that we were hiding assets, that we had cheated her out of money she had loaned us, that we were using expensive lawyers to steal from family members who couldn't afford legal representation. The lies were becoming more elaborate and vicious, designed to destroy our reputations, even if the lawsuit failed. The stress was taking a severe toll on our marriage. Sarah was torn between defending our property rights and feeling guilty about fighting her own sister in court. I was angry not just at Linda, but at Sarah for having allowed the manipulation to continue for so long. We were snapping at each other over minor issues, sleeping poorly, and struggling to maintain normalcy in our daily lives. Maybe we should just offer them some money to make this go away, Sarah suggested one evening after particularly stressful depositions. Maybe a few $1,000s would be worth it to get our lives back. Absolutely not, I replied firmly. Paying Linda anything would validate her claims and encourage her to make more demands in the future. We cannot reward this behavior with money. It will only make her more aggressive. The principle was important, but so was our sanity. The lawsuit was consuming our thoughts, our time, and our financial resources. Legal bills were mounting, and the emotional toll was severe. Linda had succeeded in making our mortgage-free life feel more stressful than our debt-heavy years had been. The breakthrough came during Linda's deposition, when our lawyer pressed her to provide specific evidence of her financial contributions to our success. Under oath, Linda was forced to admit that she had never loaned us money for the home purchase, had never made mortgage payments on our behalf, and had never provided any financial support that could reasonably be considered an investment in our property. So your claim to ownership is based on emotional support and advice? Our lawyer asked. Family relationships are more than just financial transactions, Linda replied defensively. I helped shape their relationship. I provided guidance during difficult times. I created the foundation that allowed their success, but he never provided any money, services, or tangible benefits that could be considered a property investment. Love and support are the most valuable investments, Linda insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. The deposition revealed the weakness of Linda's legal position, but it also revealed something more disturbing. She genuinely believed her own claims. Years of entitlement and manipulation had convinced her that emotional support created property rights, that family relationships generated ownership claims, that her desires were equivalent to legal rights. Our lawyer was confident about the case outcome, but she warned us that Linda might escalate further rather than accept defeat. People who file frivolous lawsuits often become more desperate and unpredictable when their legal strategies fail. You should be prepared for her to try other tactics. The warning proved prescient. As it became clear that her lawsuit would fail, Linda's behavior became increasingly erratic and concerning. She began driving by our home at odd hours, sometimes sitting in her car outside for extended periods, as if conducting surveillance. She started contacting our neighbors, claiming to be concerned about family property and asking questions about our routines and activities. The harassment escalated when Linda somehow obtained our cell phone numbers and began calling us at all hours. The conversations were rambling and often incoherent, mixing legal threats with emotional manipulation and bizarre claims about family law and property rights. We changed our numbers twice, but she managed to obtain the new ones each time. Sarah's mental health was deteriorating under the constant pressure. She was having trouble sleeping, eating, and concentrating at work. The sister she had loved and trusted her entire life had become a source of terror and stress. The family relationships she had valued were crumbling under the weight of Linda's increasingly desperate behavior. I don't understand how it came to this, Sarah confided one night after another sleepless evening spent listening for sounds outside our windows. How did my sister become someone who would sue us, harass us, and try to steal our home? When did she become so consumed with greed and entitlement? The answer was that Linda had probably always been this person, but her manipulative skills had hidden her true nature until she faced absolute rejection of her demands. The mask had finally slipped completely, revealing the narcissistic predator who had been carefully grooming Sarah for years, preparing her for eventual exploitation. The final resolution came not in court, but through Linda's own escalating behavior. Her harassment became so frequent and disturbing that we were able to obtain a restraining order, requiring her to stay away from our home and cease all contact with us. The legal documentation of her behavior patterns provided additional evidence for our defense against her property lawsuit. Faced with the restraining order and the obvious weakness of her legal position, Linda finally agreed to drop the lawsuit in exchange for our agreement not to pursue harassment charges against her. The settlement cost us nearly $10,000 in legal fees, but it ended the nightmare that had consumed for months of our lives. The victory was complete but hollow. We had successfully defended our property rights and ended Linda's harassment, but the cost had been severe. Our relationship with Sarah's parents remained strained due to Linda's manipulation of the family narrative. Our marriage had been tested in ways that left lasting scars. Our enjoyment of our mortgage-free home was forever tainted by memories of the battle we had fought to keep it. in the quiet aftermath of the legal settlement, Sarah and I began the process of rebuilding our relationship and our sense of security. We installed a security system, changed our locks, and created new routines that helped us feel safe in our own home. We also started couples therapy to address the trust issues and communication problems that Linda's manipulation had revealed. "I should have seen what she was doing years earlier," Sarah admitted during one of our therapy sessions. "I should have protected you from her manipulation and protected our marriage from her interference. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand what was really happening." The healing process was slow but genuine. Sarah worked to recognize and reject the guilt and self-doubt that Linda had programmed into her thoughts. I worked to forgive Sarah for the moments when Linda's manipulation had temporarily succeeded, understanding that psychological abuse victims shouldn't be blamed for their abusers. Success. We also made practical changes to protect ourselves from future manipulation. We established clear boundaries around family financial requests, created protocols for handling unexpected visitors, and developed communication strategies for resisting guilt-based pressure tactics. The experience had taught us valuable lessons about the importance of boundaries and the dangers of unlimited family obligation. 6 months after the restraining order was finalized, we received word through Sarah's parents that Linda and Robert had moved to another state, supposedly for new job opportunities, but more likely to escape the reputation damage from their failed lawsuit and restraining order. The physical distance brought psychological relief, reducing our daily stress and allowing us to enjoy our home without constant vigilance. The legal victory also brought unexpected benefits. Word of our successful defense against Linda's frivolous lawsuit spread through our professional and social networks, bringing support and admiration from people who respected our principled stand against manipulation and entitlement. Friends and colleagues who had initially questioned our refusal to help family eventually understood the full scope of Linda's behavior and supported our decisions. Our mortgage-free status, once threatened by legal challenges, became a source of strength and security that enhanced every aspect of our lives. Without monthly housing payments, we were able to accelerate our retirement savings, build substantial emergency funds, and pursue career opportunities based on interest rather than financial necessity. The freedom that we had worked so hard to achieve was finally ours to enjoy. Looking back on that terrible period, I realized that Linda's attack on our property rights was also an attack on the American dream itself. The idea that hard work and sacrifice should be rewarded with security and prosperity. Her sense of entitlement represented everything wrong with a culture that increasingly views success as collective property rather than individual achievement. But our successful defense of our rights proved that determination and legal knowledge can still protect honest people from predatory family members and frivolous lawsuits. The system worked, even though it required significant time, money, and emotional energy to make it work properly. The experience also taught us valuable lessons about family relationships and financial boundaries. Love doesn't create ownership rights. Emotional support doesn't generate property claims. Family status doesn't override legal principles or personal boundaries. These lessons, learned through painful experience, now guide our approach to all family financial interactions today. As I write this story while sitting in our beautiful mortgage-free home, I can honestly say that the battle was worth fighting. Our property rights are secure, our marriage is stronger, and our financial future is bright. Linda's attempt to steal what we had earned through hard work ultimately failed, teaching us that principle and persistence can triumph over manipulation and entitlement. The deed to our home still hangs framed in our living room, not just as a symbol of financial achievement, but as a reminder that some things are worth fighting for. Our home is ours, legally, morally, and completely, and no amount of family pressure or legal harassment can change that fundamental truth. As we plan for our future together, we do so with the confidence that comes from having defended our rights and our values against their most serious challenge. We know now that our love is strong enough to withstand external pressure, our principles are solid enough to guide difficult decisions, and our property rights are secure enough to build upon for generations to come. What do you think about Linda's outrageous behavior? Have you ever dealt with family members who felt entitled to your success or property? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories about family drama, legal battles, and the triumph of justice over manipulation. The next story will shock you even more. It's about a mother-in-law who tried to claim ownership of her daughter-in-law's inheritance, and the surprising way that battle ended. You won't want to miss it.